Okay, people. So today I am joined by Tendayi Nyeke, who is the writer, director, and producer of Burns and Song, right? A new TV pilot playing at Dances with Films. Tendayi, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate that.
My pleasure, Kevin. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. Right. So this must feel exciting, right? Taking your, what I mean, your project to a big festival like this. How are you feeling right now?
Super pumped. It's like, you know, there was a plan. It was like we want to do something independently, and the strategy is like get recognized internationally, even though it's a South African project. You've got a strategy in your head, and then it's actually playing out. You're like, oh, we got into a pretty cool festival. We actually got into a pretty cool festival. So when the reality is kind of unfolding, you're just like, this is so cool. So very, very excited for it to launch in such a big way.
Mm. Yeah. Do you think things are changing a lot? Do you think, you know, let's say 10 years ago, there would be such a push to get the film onto an international market?
Um, I don't think there is a push, actually. I think it was a self imposed one because we, as a company, want to make African content that can be enjoyed by global audiences. So
Mm.
we're just like, we don't want to make local just for local, which is a
Yeah.
strategy for a lot of countries where they're like, we got to service our audience primarily. And we're not so concerned about the way the rest of the world will respond to this. Um, Except for maybe the US. I think the US is pretty intentional about being as global as possible. But we just decided we want our stories to travel. So it was important to see how the pilot would be received internationally, especially really high profile festivals, because their tastes are so high and they see so much stuff that doesn't necessarily end up broadcast. So I don't know. I think it was just what we wanted, like, because we want to speak to the world and tell uniquely African stories, but have people like you watching them. It was important for us to play at an international festival.
Mm. Yes, I feel that's what I kind of meant. I probably phrased my question a bit clunkily, but
Okay.
yeah, as on a personal level to get things out
Yeah.
to the world rather than make them for, as you say, for the local audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I think it was like a couple of years ago. I noticed that like Netflix were playing. It seemed more global content from
Mm.
around the world. Because, at first you were seeing a lot of, US stuff, but
Mm.
then you started seeing things from Brazil and Spain and Italy, Germany, Africa, right? And there's a lot more African things showing up
Mm.
uh, on Netflix. And, there's Nigerian stuff, there's South African, like more of a mix than just one area,
Yeah.
which is interesting.
Yes, I love that because then it means we get to watch each other's stuff, right? Like, I don't know if you got into Squid Games and that whole phenomenon. And then what was that one? Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao. That it was a Spanish show. Heist was like a heist show. Um,
Oh,
Money Heist, I think it was called.
yeah, money, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Which the crazy thing about like Squid Games and Money Heist is like Squid Games got a reality TV
I
series,
know, right?
which is crazy. Even though some of the news about the behind the scenes sounds kind of crazy, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? But it's got a second season, so it can't be exactly what we've been hearing. But that
Mhm.
was very popular, it seems. Squid Games itself is getting a second season,
Mm.
and supposedly David Fincher is doing a US remake of it.
Oh
So
my goodness.
yeah, so that's just like gone through the roof. Money Heist got a Berlin spin-off,
Yeah.
and I think there's a Japanese spin-off, a Tokyo spin-off. So it's like, you know, things that aren't just US based.
Mm.
There's an audience for them,
Hmm.
right? There's an appetite for content from these different spots around the world. which is like when you look at the news, it feels like everyone's fighting with each other and everyone hates each other. But then when you see things like this, you know, there's this appetite for stuff from other countries. It is hopeful. There's a hopefulness in it, which is great.
And I think that's what I love about storytelling and what we do. I mean, what you do, talking to people from all over the place, is that you start to break down stereotypes. Like we've got to tell stories, right? Because if all you're getting is the news reports and that's it, right? That's the only exposure you have into Korea or Israel, even, and you're not watching stuff, the human stories or African stories or whatever. You have a perception. I mean, you know, people talk about like, oh yeah, when people think of Africa, they think of flies on starving children's mouths, and then you watch a show like, I don't know, How to Ruin Christmas, and you're like, what? Like, look at this elite class of people and black excellence and affluence, whatever black excellence means, but there's affluence and like people that aren't necessarily even affluent have really high qualities of life, and they're funny and they have family drama and they fall in love and they're relatable and they're like you and me. So I think that is the beauty of filmmaking and storytelling, that we learn about other people through these things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think a problem, you know, probably was, you know, in the 80s, you had like Live Aid, and you just have that line is like, do they know it's Christmas time? And you're
Oh my
just like,
gosh. Oh my
yo,
gosh.
what do you mean? Do you know it's Christmas time? Like, what do you like? I think as a little kid, when you hear that, you don't realize what's going on, and then when you get older and you hear it again and you hear the lyrics and you're just like, that is super offensive. Like, it's like, I get, you know, they're trying to do something nice, right? But it's in such a patronizing way. But those kind of things feed the perception on what people then perceive something to be like, which is
I
crazy.
agree. I agree. You know, I have a friend that works in the NGO sector, and in fact, she was in the videography, like, so she was producing these kinds of videos, and she was just like, you know what? Sometimes you actually have to do that to get people to give money,
Yeah.
even though it's patronizing. But you like to get people to get it and to give money, you have to be that way. And she's like, it makes me sick. And I was just like, really? Are there no other ways to like get people's compassion? And but she was like, that's the low-hanging fruit. Like, you use comparable things in their lives. Anyway, but I hear you on the patronizing component. Like,
Well, I feel the thing, you know, the big issue is, right, that's the way it's been always been done. So that's what people do, and you have to just change the narrative, right? You just have to show people something different, and it might not yield huge returns at first, but this is storytelling, right? And that's the thing that engages with people's stories, right? And you change that story, you create an interesting narrative, you can change things, right? You can bring people in, and it's like seeing things like Burns and Song, right? It's a different look at things. It's seeing, you know, a story that you may have seen from Hollywood but told from an African point of view, which is really intriguing.
well, I'm hoping it hasn't been seen in. No, I suppose the genre, right? Like, where it's like
Yeah.
a horror thriller, which was definitely deliberate. You know, people in my community always joke that, like, you know, I came up in South Africa, like my film career developed in South Africa, and there was this one show that was really, really popular. Well, it wasn't actually popular. It got one season and then it got canceled, but it was really well made. So it was really well made. And then the reason they canceled it was like some of this horror stuff that we're seeing as people's real lives, like spirituality in certain places, is so like alive. It's not like a concept. It's not like a a genre, it's like, oh, I think I felt something. It's a community or whatever. So and when we would talk about burns and songs, that was kind of like what I was exploring, of like, what's the line between what I think, my psychology, and my psychology manifesting in a particular way, and my fears and my whatever, versus spirituality that we say is around us and real, especially me, who was kind of raised in a dual culture where it was like Christian family, but also deeply tied to, the spiritual aspect. So Christianity is saying, no, that's not real. But my culture is going, oh, that's real. And then someone who's in the middle, who's like, well, I'm experiencing these things. Which one is it? So it was just interesting. Like horror for some people is like life. It's like, oh yeah, I saw something, and it's a spirit, and there's like a name for it, and there's a whatever. And anyway, so I just found that a cool thing to explore for somewhere, that has a combination of these things in day-to-day life, and not everybody, of course, but and then just me as a modern woman, exploring those things and going, what's real and what isn't, and actually, do I have a place? Is it on me to decide? Is it on the person who's experiencing it to decide? And can we hold compassion as we're watching people go through what they go through, and try and understand them? So,
yeah. I mean, the irony of that, right? This crossroads meetings of spirituality and Christianity is that in Christianity you've kind of got a zombie story. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? It's just like you
That's
can have
funny.
you can have Christians say this is nonsense, this isn't, but in their story, you have a magician who is creating fish and loaves for people, who rises from the dead. You can look at
That's
the Christian story and go, that's fantasy, right? Or that's horror, or that's, if you don't come from that background, it's going to look completely different. So when you have a Christian person saying, oh, that makes no sense, you can't have 10 gods, you can't have, although I will say, right, any religion that has more than one god, it makes more sense to me, because one person doing everything, being all over the place, it just means like, yo, or it's like politicians, right? You have a politician that's, or a president, a prime minister, who's meant to know, agriculture, who's meant to know education, is meant to know, and they do not. Whenever they're in front of a panel and they get asked questions, they're mumbling all over the place. So one God that's meant to know all of these things, I'm just like, come on now. It makes more sense having a god of thunder, a god of love, a god of this.
Well, isn't that what makes the person God? Like, if they know everything, I think that's part of the conversation, right? Where it's like, you're this entity that actually, this conversation is just, again, proving the point of how important it is to have diverse perspectives, because a lot of the time, I think it's each of us trying to make sense of the world, right? And if that framework for you makes sense, and you're navigating your life and you feel whole and whatever, and somebody else's framework makes sense for them, I think we're okay. I think we're okay. And then it's okay to hold dialogue. Like, it's okay to be like, oh, yeah, I don't know if God can be one person. Like, how can you be an expert in everything? And then someone else can be like, well, that's what makes them God, right? And like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
No, I think,
No, I think the big thing is, right, it's listening to each other instead of going, no, Tendayi, that's not it. No. You have to go with what I'm saying, right? It's been like, oh, that's an interesting perspective. I've never thought of it like that, right? And I think that's the difference when you're watching things from other countries, because the structure is different, right? The feel, there's watching Burns and Song, it's different to watching like a US UK production, there's a different feel to it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It feels like there's a different structure. But so it would be easy to be like, what's happening here? This no, they're not doing it like
Mm-hmm.
we do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But no, because it's interesting, right? And you have these universal themes, regardless of language and other barriers to entry. Themes are universal, right?
Mm.
Love, anger, anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
all of these things, like, I think everyone can understand, and it breaks down those walls, it
Mm.
breaks down those barriers, and lets you into a story from these different angles, these different point of views,
Mm.
which is really interesting.
Well, that's my wish. I mean, I don't know if I was just like, oh, I'm just following structure or flashback sequences. Like I'm, when you've trained in script writing or whatever, and you know how they like know the rules to break them. And I think I want to break more rules, but not just for its own sake. But like again, when you're trying to reflect people's psychology, right? Things aren't linear always, right?
No.
Things are fragmented and fractured, and so you can use the art form to find a representation of fractured and fragmentation, and memory and the line again, and the line, and that's the beauty, man, of like art. That's the beauty of like expression, and then the hope is that the audience gets the feeling of what you're trying to share. I really appreciate what you're saying about like when you're in different regions, story structure. Because even Squid Games was
Yeah, that was
like
different.
you know
Yeah.
again, same with the other one, Money Heist, that we're talking about as well. It had flashback sequence in there, and then timeline stuff, and there's another one that also did that to a great. Anyway, we won't get into that, but like working in LA now, I noticed that um, like in trying to tell certain stories, because certain things are normal to me, um, and they're unfamiliar to an American audience, I have a lot more explaining to do. So there's certain things
Mm.
that I take for granted as an African person. Like, yeah, no, like someone might thank their ancestors for something and then pray to God, and that's just like normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then someone like, wait, what ancestors? What's that? And so it's interesting because I'm like, we now understand, as far as commercial filmmaking is concerned, some degree of Asian cultures, and not, Asia is not a monolith, but you know what I mean, like
Yes.
Japanese culture or whatever, because we're so exposed and we've seen so many, films. Then we've seen, samurais. We understand what a samurai is, and we understand why he must avenge whatever. We understand honor, and we understand ritual suicide, because we've seen so much now, right? So
Mm.
there's less explaining. Shogun, and but like if you see for the first time, you're like, excuse me, like you're so embarrassed you'd kill yourself. Are you sure about that? Like, but now we've kind of come to get it,
Yes.
and then we emotionally connect with that, and we feel empathy, and we know what's coming. Whereas with African cinema, we're not there yet. Like there's so few stories that people are exposed to, and my wish is that like with each thing that I make, that we're understood a little bit better through the perspective of the character, and we're not judged, we're not seen as the kids with the flies on our mouths. We're seen as human that are experiencing climate change, which is why there's drought, because there's
Mm.
climate change, not because these people are stupid and don't know how to take care of themselves, but because there was something that happened historically, and you know what I mean. So
Yes.
um
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, it goes even beyond like climate change, right? It goes through colonization.
Oh,
You know what I mean? If you take the infrastructure away from something and then go, here you go, right? It's going to take a while to rebuild, to put in a new structure, and that's oftentimes not considered, thought about, right? And yeah, it can be very frustrating.
it's heartbreaking, because again, like then we're looked like, why can't these people take care of themselves or whatever? And it's like, well, do you know history? um
Mm.
when you've come from a subsistence farming lifestyle, where you're taking care of your family and your neighbors, and that's all you need to do. And that's, I mean, not a perfect, no culture is perfect, but if that's been your framework, and then now we're in an industrial age, to your point, and then now we have to learn the industrial process, but now the food economy is controlled by big organizations,
Yes.
right? And then people have moved away from fertile soil and the big
Yeah. And GM crops, right? GM seeds that yield differently and cost more money. You have fertilizers that destroy the soil. So you where normally, you know what I mean, you just plant a different seed and then you turn it around, boom, boom, boom. Now you've destroyed that topsoil, and you can only grow this one thing because it's controlled by this large organization. And as you say, it's these different factors that are changing, the way people have been living and existing, but then with no, no system in place to go, okay, so we can, transition to this. Right. But then it's just like, oh, why aren't they, having enough food? And why aren't they doing this? And why? And it's just like, what are you talking about?
Exactly. That's a movie. We should write that movie. I feel like that's like, there's a movie in there in this conversation.
It'd be difficult getting it funded.
That is true. That's off the bat.
Oh man, like with this, what another thing I thought was really interesting is the Ngozi. I might have butchered that. But it's this kind of the spiritual aspect of it that Risimu is facing, because I think at first I wondered if those things were manifestations of her internal struggle, right? Of she's running away from a past that maybe was frowned upon by family or other things, and so she's kind of diminished herself. And so these nightmares, this thing is her inner self fighting, right? Trying to go, hey, stop diminishing yourself. Be you, be powerful, be strong. I wondered if it was that. But then you understand, oh, it's something more than that, which is interesting because I think we grow up in the Western world with like the Brothers Grimm, with Hans Christian Andersen, with all these other folklores and fairy tales and legends and myths. But I think you're not told, so you don't think about the myths, the folklores, the legends, right? The fairy tales from other parts of the world. So to see this, it's like this glimpse into African folklore in a way. And that's super interesting, right? Because it's like peeling those layers back. It's seeing something else from somewhere else, right? So this richer tapestry that we had no clue about. And that was very fascinating for me.
I'm really happy to hear that. I mean, just to pitch it to your audiences, if people don't know what Burns and Song is about, we've got Risimu, who is like, the perfect housewife and the perfect mom, trying to like keep her perfect, small but controlled life going, right? So she adores her husband, she adores her child, and today's a big day for her husband and her kid. But the day very quickly starts to unravel. And the perfect life that she thought she had is falling apart pretty significantly. And what appears to her is this, whether it's her or the spirit that we call Ngozi, that says to her, you need to repay what you owe me, or I will completely ruin your life. So we meet a character, or basically she says, or I'll take what you took from me from you, right? So we meet a character who, and I'm so glad that you saw that she is someone who is diminishing herself, because there's some people that are housewives and moms, and it's by choice. They find fulfillment and joy in that, but she's running. So that's
Yeah.
a persona that she's put, and she's hiding behind that. And then there's that additional conflict of like, if you're not being who you truly are, the person that you truly are wars against the facade, right? So there's that
Mm.
layer too. And so this thing we were talking about earlier about the battle between the psychology and the spiritual thing, because you often find people that like, we talk about how, you know, people that do really terrible things, they feel this spiritual burden, and they sometimes feel some kind of redemption if they convert to a religion or they pursue spirituality to free themselves. Other people do things to kind of redeem what they've done or whatever. In my culture, there is a spirit called Ngozi. It's believed to be, my culture has a culture of not imprisonment and doing time, but making good. So atoning, reintegration, but there's often a price to pay, right? And the goal of the price is to make things right,
Yes.
versus just put you away. There's a part of it where it's like you're given an opportunity to, you know, restitution. But if you fail to do that, if there's no justice in this lifetime, in your lifetime, justice will be sought out by the spirit of the person that you wronged across your family line. So if Kevin, you do something to me, like if you, for argument's sake, decide you didn't like this interview and you send a missile to my apartment building and I die, and you deliberately took my life, my spirit will come for you. If you die and you haven't made good, it'll come for your offspring, and it'll continue to torment your family line until someone makes good.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Hold on for a second. Hey, cool off the missiles. Yeah, cool them off. You do not need to come back. Okay, stop. Right. Okay, let's
Please
go.
don't take the missile, look, it was for illustration. And sorry for a violent thing, but it was often to do with crimes as significant as murder, or like when you know, with colonial history, even like, you know, taking people's property, taking something that doesn't belong to you, where you significantly hurt someone. It's in the spirit of that person, Ngozi, will come for your family line and demand that your family line make things right. So we see the spirit of Ngozi in Risimu's, you know, story. And we're like, what did she do? Why is there something chasing her? But we also see that she's hiding and she's, you know, not happy with herself. So you're asking yourself, is it Ngozi or is it the side of her that's fighting to come out? Yeah, and I mean, why I wanted to tell the stories, I used to hear these stories growing up, Kevin. Like I would hear, oh, the lady down the road, yeah, like she was taken away because she has to go to this family and you know, give birth to this child and give it to this family, because a child in that family's line was taken by her family, so she has to. And I was like, what? Come on. So I would question this stuff, and then you meet people and they're like, oh, in the middle of the night things are moving around my whatever. People have these stories about like the terror they're experiencing, and then it's revealed to them what was done in their family line or whatever. And look, I also don't want to give a misperception of Africa. It's not every household, but I would hear little pockets of stories like this, and I was like, what's real and what isn't? So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, it's like I feel that, you know, the other thing is in the Western world, like, you know, repentance and Hail Marys and, you know, I mean, all of that kind of stuff. So there are those similar threads in things, you know, like karma and just all of this. So, you know, I think it's all the same thing, but just in different packaging. But
So true.
yeah, but the issue is, you know, we don't usually see African packaging, you know, so it takes a minute for people to understand, oh, that's just like this thing, but it just dressed differently.
Look, my biggest takeaway from this whole interview is how you're like, the story of Jesus is a zombie movie. It's a zombie story. I like light bulb. I'm like, that is legit a zombie movie. Anyway, that's the Western lens on that, right? You'd be like, "Oh, zombie film." Mind you, we have zombies in Africa too, and I think in Haiti, right? Like the concept of that is but to your point, it's just packaged differently. It's called a different name,
Yes.
And so on. So, which is cool. I love it. It's so cool. We've got so much in common as humans. So much.
Well, yeah, like when you look at, Native Americans, right? They've skinwalkers and all of this kind of
Yes.
stuff. And it's all a similar thing, but just different names. And it's always just fascinating to learn about it.
Yeah.
Right? When you hear these stories, you're like, oh, that's really interesting. That's fun. Oh, I didn't know that. That's very similar to this other thing. It just, it's like the internet kind of helps break down barriers. It lets people talk to people across the world, but stories also break down those barriers. It introduces people to different cultures, different concepts, different ways to perceive, the world around us. So it's really, I think, important for things such as Burns and Song to be in the world, right? And so, for you to not just go, I'm just going to make this for South Africa, but to be like, you know what, I'm going to take it to festivals around the world. I'm going to show this part of us to everyone. I think that's really important because it helps, bring about change. It helps bring about acceptance.
And understanding and connection, I hope. So yeah. Agree.
But with this story, like, what was the actual genesis? Where did this whole thing come from? Because I'm sure you've got loads of different stories, but you decided to create this kind of horror tinged one. So where did all of that come from?
I think it's actually funny because I can't watch horror, and here I am making. I mean, it's not true. It's not full on horror. It's like at the doorstep of horror. It's like hello, hello. So for me, I was developing. There was a web series that I was involved in, that I was a producer of and a writer on, and I wanted to do a season 2. So it streamed on one of the biggest streamers in Africa. Well, the biggest streamer in Africa. In fact, it has more subscriptions than Netflix. It's called Showmax. So made this web series independently. Again, I'm actually from Zimbabwe. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe, but my career developed in South Africa, which is right next door to Zimbabwe. It's like Ireland and England. Working in South Africa, they, when you work in the television industry, they want to primarily make South African stories, naturally, right? Like if you work in America, they primarily want to make American stories. So I was always working on these South African films. And then I was like, oh, I want to make something that's specifically about where I'm from and my, the women that I grew up seeing. And it was like a dramedy and all of those things. And then we got picked up by the streamer. And then our distributor was asking for a season 2. And I was like, yeah, well, we self-finance this, okay? Like, give me money if you want me to make season 2. Right? So it was like hard because I think we just broke even. And like I said, made it independently because no one was throwing money at me to make a Zimbabwean story. But I wanted to make a Zimbabwean story, so I found a way. And that was like a little door, like a little step forward. And then okay, season 2, please. And then we just didn't have the money. But I was like, okay, let me spend time developing. Let me go deep while we're trying to figure out the money. How can I make the story better? Just, to up its chances of selling, so that it's not limited by the region that it's from. So I was developing season 2, and it was like this ensemble. It was like this big cast. And Risimu's story was kind of in there. But she was like one of 5 women. And so she was disappearing in all of this, it's like a Desperate Housewives format. And like Bree, it's like you want to tell Bree's story, but there's all of these other people. And so my script editor was like, who should we be following here? Who should we care about? I'm like, haven't you seen Ensemble Things? You should care about all of them. And by the episode 13, like it all kind of, and she's like, yeah, I feel like you're losing your emphasis because you're splitting our attention. So I decided to focus on one of the characters, and then she actually just evolved into someone completely outside of that. And then I was curious about it, and I started to see a bit of her in me. I was like, oh, I identify with her. I gave up a dream once. Oh, I've got things in my past that I'm ashamed of. I was like, oh yeah, like there's secrets that my mother keeps from me that I don't know if I'll ever hear. That generation keeps secrets from us, but isn't that dangerous? So I started to like see myself and see the matriarchs in my life in this character, and it just started to build out. And this was like 3 years ago. And it just, I'd write and then put it away because I have a day job, and then write and put it. And then just more and more the story was kind of, I think things I was asking about, maybe it's because I was having conversations with my mom, and then I heard this story about this lady who was like gave birth and was about to give up her kid to another family, and I was like, what? So I think it was like the focus on this character, and then just life just kind of breathing itself, like breathing onto this story. And then I finished. I wrote an episode. Like maybe 2-ish years ago, a year and a half ago. And then my script editor was like, I think you have something here. And I was like, yeah, and wrote a series Bible, and then applied to some grants, and then got some grant money. I was like, okay, and then I had a bit of savings. I don't recommend it. But I was like, I had a bit of savings. And then I had my community, my filmmaking community. I was like, hey, y'all, I wrote something. If you like it, please work on it. I can't pay you what you normally charge, but if you like it, it'll be great. And it'll be like 5 days of your life. And people said yes. They took less than they normally pay. And then we made the pilot, and then here we are now.
Awesome. No, that's great.
Yeah.
So you have a series Bible.
I do. I know where it's going. I know how it ends, and I know what season 2 is going to be.
Okay.
Maybe no. I don't know what season 2 is.
So how many episodes would this technically be?
Currently, it's sitting at 9. I can probably get it. When you're doing development, you can change the shape of it and whatever. But it is sitting at 9. 9 episodes, a limited series, and episode 1 is focusing on Risimu, but there's other people that are going to be part of the story, because the episode opens with a dream / memory. We don't know yet, but something went down, and so we're going to meet the people that were in that moment in her life as the series progresses. As we explore the answer to this. So it plays over 9 episodes. She's going to evolve. Like we met her as someone who is inward. Is she going to come out of her shell? And what does that look like? Who is this woman that is hiding? The person that, if she stopped running anymore, who does she become? So exploring that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because by the end of it, I'm just like, all right, so what's gonna happen? Where she go? Right? It's interesting because after she wakes up from this nightmare, Tendero is just like, oh, how are you? And so we see their dynamic, and we can see that there's feelings there's emotions, there's love. But then you see this kind of dismissal, right? This you know what I mean? Like, do what I say, kind of this disregard for her feelings, right? It's like the way the meeting is organized, when it's just like it could have been somewhere else, right? And the constant allusions to Nicole, right? So we see these things. So you're like, wait, there was love, but then there's disregard, there's disrespect. So you're wondering, how is Simu going to navigate this, right? What could change? Where could this character go? how is she going to, I mean, work with all of this? How is she going to evolve? And that's the one big thing about it that you're kind of contemplating, you're wondering.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that what relationships are like, whether they're friendships or family dynamics, right? Where there's a base of love, but sometimes we breach each other's boundaries. Sometimes we ask for more than we should. And if the other party doesn't say no, we'll take it, even though we know we're doing too much, So I think I was just trying to set up a marriage where you're just like, okay, he's the sun and the moon and the stars of his own life. And Risimu was very comfortable supporting that. What would happen if she decided to be like, actually, and I definitely want to explore that. So you do have people like that, they marry certain kinds of people because of what, people that they marry people that will amplify their lives versus being a real partner,
Yes.
And I think Risimu was very comfortable being that person. She's like, yeah, I've got a purpose. I've got a family. I've got a husband. That is my purpose. And she's okay. But this Ngozi thing, or this side of her that is fighting, is asking her to pay attention. And it threatens that identity that she's assumed. So, and I think it happens with all of us, don't you think, Kevin? Like, where it's like, we might make decisions that are protective decisions, or I'm too afraid to do something. But something, if you're desiring more, whether it's an inward battle or external things, will force you to maybe blow up your status quo. And you can choose. You can be like, no, I'm not gonna change. Or, oh, I might have to actually do this differently if I'm gonna move on to the next thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think the things I was wondering about was, has she decided to, live in this way, to tolerate this because of the past, because she's trying to, push down this other thing. So it's just like, okay, well, I'm going to now be this by this smaller version of me. So I was wondering if it's partly that's the reason for it, because it's just like, she can go, actually, I need you to, interact with me as an equal rather than as a lesser. But it's just like, we see those ones where someone maybe they've not subconsciously realized what they're doing. So then everything changes. But then you could have the flip of it going, no, I like the status quo. So I'm not changing. And so it's just like, oh, I wonder which it would be, right? Which way could this go, right? Where were we going to see the story evolve and transform? That's compelling.
Well, hopefully a broadcaster says, yeah, we're going to partner with you. Let's make the series. And then we can extrapolate. We can keep exploring her.
Oh man, yeah, that would be really great.
Yeah.
That would be really great. Have you, because I saw this was like the East Coast premiere. So you've played it at other festivals so far?
No, it's actually the world premiere. So this is the first festival it's playing at.
Okay.
But Dances with Films has an LA festival and a New York one. So I'm hoping they'll play this at the New York festival, because that'll be great to have folks over there watching and responding. I'm super keen. Like, I'm gonna be in the audience. I'm super keen to see how Americans, especially East Coasters, respond to this. And because we're in a block where other pilots are playing, I mean, we shouldn't compare babies, never, right? But it's always interesting when people are watching very different things, and then you just see what they lean in to,
Yes.
and what they kind of, if there's confusion on their faces or whatever. And it's educational as a writer and as a filmmaker to like see how audiences are reacting. But I hope my ego isn't shattered and I quit. I hope I'm like, um, and I've got filmmaker friends of mine that are coming. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have invited them. We should have done it in secret. But yeah, I'm really excited to just watch the audience and see how they respond.
Yeah, I think the interesting part of that, because it's always that thing about going to a festival, covering a festival, because you see so many films during
Mm,
a day,
mm,
right? And I think sometimes if that first thing is so good or even so heavy, right, that can change the tone of the other things that you
mhm,
then see afterwards.
mhm,
So it kind of, putting, you know, Burns and Song in this block, it's like I wonder what the other things around it are gonna be like, because
mm,
that could change the tone of how
mhm.
it's perceived, right?
Yeah, I think in the curation, I could be wrong, but like they might have grouped pilots that are similar tonally together. Because it would be jarring if you watch a comedy first and then you go to Birds of Song, then you watch a romance and just be like, what on earth is this emotional roller coaster?
Yeah.
Um, but I know, like, we had this really cool mixer. They hosted a really great mixer. And so the filmmakers, we know, we're just talking to each other and we're hearing each other's pitches. And I'm like, oh, looks like the psychological thriller, like a horror tone, is a consistent thread between some are comedy horror, but there was
Mm.
definitely a genre piece when I was listening to people's pitches. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, so let's hope that they've grouped them in that way.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I did notice was I covered Dances with Films last year.
Hmm.
And one thing that really kind of stood out to me was the support all the writers, directors, producers were giving each other,
Mm.
right? Like you'd post something and then, someone else had spoken to, you know, will comment and, for that filmmaker and be like, oh man, I loved your film. Yo, this is a great conversation. I hope you have mad success. And
Oh,
you just
that's so
saw
cool.
that over and over again. So it does seem to be this kind of family vibe, this
Mhm.
community
Mm,
within Dances with Films, which is, yeah, you don't always see at a festival.
mhm,
So that's nice. So I think, you're definitely gonna have a lot of support
mm,
from
mhm,
those around you.
mhm,
And, as I say, look, the story itself, it is a universal story. It's just looking at it through a different window. So
mhm,
it's intriguing, right? You're wondering, where's this going? What's gonna
mhm,
happen? You
mm.
know? So yeah, no, I imagine, you won't have to worry about people you've
Thank
invited and
you.
how they get,
Thank
the audience
you.
and all of that.
I'm so excited to watch other people's films. So tomorrow is the opening.
Yeah.
So we're gonna see the opening movie, and then there's gonna be like a
Oh,
networking.
it's really good. Paper
Yeah,
Flowers is really
oh, I
good.
cannot wait. I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah, Magesh, I spoke to Mahesh
Mm-hmm.
Pilar the other day, and super great guy, right?
Nice.
And the film, like, because it's based on a true story, and I had no clue. I had no
Wow.
clue it's based on this true story, but it's fascinating, and it's it's different because I think it's like with your story, right? So this is like Shell uh Sha Shion
Mm-hmm.
Shah,
Mm-hmm.
Shaolin Shah. Like he's of Indian descent.
Mm,
And so we're watching this story with different faces.
mm, mm,
And that is always just really refreshing to
Mm,
see a story about love and heartache and just all of these things, but
mm,
through this different lens. And so it was a fascinating, but it's just so well done, so
that's
well
cool.
done. So I think you're definitely going to really enjoy that one.
Can't wait. I can't wait.
Yeah, I've watched, how many have I watched? Have I watched two or three? I can't remember if I've watched two or three things so far.
Okay.
And they've all been really good.
Yay.
So yes, I think you're gonna have a fun time. You're gonna have a fun time at this festival.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm.
Awesome.
But you know what I mean? But your pilot, right? I think it stands up with all of these things. So yeah, I think it's gonna be good. Like
Yay.
from just the feedback that you've had so far from it,
Mm.
has that kind of helped you think about how you could, package this to funders, investors?
Yeah, actually. It's so like these things independent, you're kind of learning on your own, and I've worked for companies before, and you forget like it's someone's whole job to handle publicity. It's someone's
Yes.
whole job to, but when you're doing indie, you're taking care of all of that. And so, even having a publicist is like when they're asking you questions, you're like, oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, next time I should cast it this way or whatever. And I love my cast and whatever, but I'm just going, oh, I didn't realize that was a superpower. Oh, so just everybody, like just every piece of feedback has just made me think end to end and not just one piece of it. Because I think sometimes as filmmakers, we're just like, oh, I just want to make my thing and get out in the
Yeah.
world and whatever. But you're like, there's certain things, that example we talk about the NGOs and these adverts, they even know it's Christmas. When you're pitching, there's just certain language that you have to use to just grab people's attention. Or so when we're putting our pitch decks together, it's like, okay, the visual packaging of everything is super important and not just my personality. But it's like if someone doesn't get to meet you, what are they looking at and what does it look like? How are you talking about the project, the shooting style, what you might want to push if you get, funding. So yeah, Kevin, like it's been so helpful, overwhelming at times though, because it's just like, do I have to do all of this by myself? And then I'm like seriously, I go, just take a nap. The world hasn't ended. And then I'm like, okay. Oh, like someone's like, oh, it'd be great if we have a teaser. Who's gonna edit that teaser? Me.
Yeah.
But now okay, having different kinds of teasers really helps you when you're pitching. And so when you do get funding, you'll know how to spend it the right way, all of those things. So it's been so educational. And I mean, I've been working in the industry a little while, but like being the person who's taking care of all of it yourself it just gives you such respect for how like things ending up on a TV channel, it takes a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have respect.
I mean, what was the thing that made you kind of feel that you could take this journey?
My earliest memories are of me forcing the neighbors to be in a play that I wrote, like from like when I was 6 years old, like wrangling everybody, forcing all of our families to sit there and watch it. And I just don't, I actually have no idea where that came from. My dad's pretty entrepreneurial, my mom too. So I think I've just always been doing that. When I look back, I think I've just always loved stories and just getting people, I've loved putting stories together and then getting audiences to feel something and to connect with something. And then like doing it again. So I think as an adult now, you're like, oh, that's called producing. Okay, that's a whole job. So I think it's just an innate thing, that I've learned how to nurture. And I'm really grateful actually that I'm not frightened by giving it a go. It's scary, but I don't let my fear get in the way. And honestly, I think coming from a small country like Zim, no one's gonna do it for me. Um,
Mm.
so in my lifetime, if I get to make three cool things that amplify Zimbabwe and my story and where my people come from, I feel like I would have done all right. So I'm just really keen to just add to the canon of storytelling, and I actually like it. I like producing. I happen to enjoy it. So yeah.
Okay. I mean, yeah, because you produced, you wrote, you
Mhm.
directed. Like, is there one of those things that kind of speaks to you more than the other, or is it just, you know, different hats for different days, right?
I think they're different facets of the same thing. So I think script writing is telling the story. Directing is telling the story, but just using a different tools. Producing is helping the story get told. Um, so I think it depends. I think my bread and butter for the last few years has been producing. So I think it's a muscle that I've exercised a lot more. Um, so I just do it. And then, but I think if I could in the next little chapter, I think writing and directing is something I just want to lean into more. Like a lot of the time it just comes from if there's a specific story I want to tell. Like I love supporting other filmmakers. So like, the project I did before was an animated thing and I was a producer on it and I was supporting 10 directors and I loved supporting them. Um, but then this story I was like itching to tell it myself.
Yeah.
So it was important for me to write it myself because it was something, and I actually tried to hire a writer to do it. And then again, my script editor was like, your voice is getting lost. The thing you're trying to say is getting lost because you're using a translator. You need to set the template. So I think with this particular story, because it's pretty close to my heart, the writing, directing part of it, and I don't have to direct the whole series of, when we get it, definitely want to work with a creative partner who um, gets it and is excited about it. But yeah, I think writing and directing right now is uh, really cool. But I come from Africa, like, so we often have to do things on our own. Like I don't get to always choose and be like, I'm just gonna direct because like who's gonna produce then Tendai? Who's gonna you know? And we're getting better. So now like there's a project that we're in pre-production for where we've now built relationships and there's now another producer who's helping me so I can concentrate on directing.
Cool.
So ultimately it's just about using what I have in my toolkit to tell a particular story.
Uh-huh. And yeah, like this is kind of a horror tinged, folklore kind of story,
Mm.
right? What other kind of stories would you like to tell?
Oh, I can tell you right now. So I love genre. Like I love using and I mean of course drama is a genre, but like stuff that's a little pushed and
Mm.
heightened. I love fantasy. I love adventure. I love stuff that leans darker, satirical. So the one I'm in pre-production for, it's called Loved Out, and maybe we'll talk again next year. Maybe we'll be premiering at Dances with Films when we're done with it. But it's like crime romance comedy. It's like got a bit. It's like a combination of things, but the crime is just I don't know if you've seen Zoolander. It's like silly.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
I just love like throwing in like a weirdness or like an offbeat sense of humor. Um, but look, I think the things I'll work on will often have a strong female perspective, whether it's a lead or a secondary character. But like I want to write females. That's what I know. That's the skin I've lived in my whole life. Um, Definitely a foot on the continent, or a foot into something that I definitely care about. Um, and then a global. Like I want everyone around the world to watch it, not just one audience.
Mm. Well, that sounds great. I mean, one thing I'm just curious about how you kind of, view it. Like creating things through a female lens,
Hmm.
right? I think sometimes and it's like we see it in so many different things, whether it's a female lead, a black lead, a Chinese lead, or
Hmm.
whatever, right? sometimes people, to heighten one thing, they diminish the other things,
Mm,
right? So you get a bit of a skewed story, or
mm,
people lean real heavy in one direction,
mhm, mm,
right? Which, it can work, right? But I think when it comes to female characters, yeah, I think people oftentimes forget that stuff like Alien, right? That
mhm,
was all set around a strong female character. Like Ripley
mm,
was like kicking ass, right?
mhm,
Terminator, that's about Linda Hamilton.
mm,
You know what I mean? They're the main focuses of
mm,
those films.
mm.
A film I loved growing up as well, but it was very difficult to watch because of the subtitles, was like La Femme Nikita.
Mhm, mhm,
Man, I love that story. You know,
mm,
again, about this strong kick-ass woman.
mm.
So I think there's interesting ways to go about crafting stories. But yeah, I was just kind of curious on your take on that. How to how you feel, you know, balancing a story to shine a light on, someone, but balancing, the perspectives and the way it's told.
I think truthfulness, that's I'm always in pursuit of that. Like, does this moment feel true? Like, even when when you're directing with actors, uh, or when when you've given the pages to the actor, and you're breaking them down and you're having conversations about the character, and whatever choices that they're exploring, you're just like, does it feel honest? Does it feel true? And not contrived? And if
Yes.
it does, if truth can be found in it, I think then you're successful. So whether you're writing a male or a female character, uh, the Sarah Connor stuff worked because she was protecting her son. So someone who might not typically be kicking ass and firing guns, we get it because of what's at stake in that person's life. I've seen the things my mom has done when her kids were in situations, and you're just like, okay, mom, you know. Um, but it was true because of what we mean to her and so on. So you would referring to the Risimu Tendero dynamic, where it's like, if I'm a person who's running and wanting to play the perfect wife to hide from a past that I can't face, I'm not going to say no. I'm going to
Yes.
have bad boundaries because I don't want to be discovered, or I don't want to give people any reason to not like me, because there's something worse, right? So if they don't like me for this little thing, if they discover the big thing, what chance do I have? And
Mm.
that's true. That's true. I think whether you're a man or a woman, I mean, I think a man, depending on the man, might handle a situation like that very differently, you know? So I think I start from there. I'm just like, gender's important because I think, particularly in where I come from, we navigate the world in a particular way. It's very different if you're born in England, as a female and as a black female, even. And I know like this, immigrant and first generation this and first generation that. But as a female in the United Kingdom, if you're a white female, the way you experience the world is very different
Oh, yeah, for
from
sure.
a black female. So we need to find the truth in each of their experiences. Like, a show that I love is Fleabag. You know, there's truth. Like, she might be an aberrant character to some people, but to other people that are human and, like, oh, I get that. I so get it, and it's true, but it might not be you. It might not be someone you know, but she's real. So
Mm.
that's my pursuit. That's my pursuit. Like, look for the truth. And I think you'll get closer to getting it right. Yeah, that's my take.
Yeah, no, I think that's yeah. I think when you break it down like that, when you're just looking for, you know, proper representations
Hmm.
of, how to navigate situations, I think that's always, I think, the best approach,
Hmm.
because when you try and do it differently, I think you can see through it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And then that's the problem, right? Because you're just like, but no one's going to do that,
Mhm.
right? Which is oftentimes an issue with horror
Mhm.
when you're just like, but why would they run up the stairs when the front door's open, right? Why would they run, why would they, you know, do that thing when they could do that, right? So I think you have to lean into the truth of things,
Mm.
and when you do that, it resonates with people.
I hope so. I think it does, and then if you're the group that's being represented and it's looking false, we can see it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For
So
sure. That's always been the problem.
yeah.
You know, you're watching it and you're like, wait, what? What are you doing? No, no, that's not real.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh man. But it is so good to see these kind of stories,
Thank you.
you know, in the
Mhm.
world, because I think for ages we've had to kind of just settle
Mhm.
for things, the things that were allowed to be made,
Mhm.
right, by the big machine.
Mhm.
And now we're getting, storytellers who are stepping out and doing things on their own right. So
Mhm.
we finally get to see these different stories, and
Mhm.
it's a great time. It's a
Yeah,
fantastic
I
time.
agree. I agree.
So, man, thank you so much for your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for yours.
Ah, no, I mean, I'm just sitting here listening, you know what I mean? So, I haven't really done anything, but no, it's just great. I love having interesting conversations and, hearing different perspectives on things, right?
Nice.
So
Too.
that's just super interesting.
Me too. I enjoy it too. Well, thank you. Thanks, Kevin.
No problem at all. So I think the big thing is, how can people keep track of all the things that you are doing? Because it sounds like there's a lot. There's a lot coming. There's a lot in the pipeline.
So our website is www.ndiani.com. Ndiani is N for November, D for dog, I for India, A for Apple, N for November, I for India.com. So www.ndiani.com. And that's our website. If you want to follow Burns and Song specifically, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Burns and Song. And then if you want to follow me specifically, I'm at Tenye Creates, which is TENYE Creates on Instagram and on LinkedIn.
Yes.
So keep
So
an eye, keep an eye.
all of those links will be on the website. So make sure you go and follow Tendi. There's a subscribe on the website. So put your email in so you do not miss anything that's coming from her.
Mhm.
And if you're in LA, right, on the 22nd, Saturday, I think it's 2:45, I
That
believe.
is correct. 2:45 p.m. at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood.
Yeah. So
Come through.
yeah, if you're there, go watch it. It's a really good story. It's a really good story. And I think if you grew up with folklore, with those kind of stories, right? This is, you know, a similar thing, right? A similar kind of gaze into something from a different part of the world, but still with those themes of love, you know, anxiety, like shame, right? Fear, just all of these themes are there. So, man, it might be from South Africa, but these things transcend language, they transcend barriers, and a good story is a good story. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
So make sure you go check out Burns and Song and make enough noise, and hopefully we get a season.
Thank you for that plug. Love it.
Well, no, this has been great. And I hope when the next project is ready, you'll come by and we can have another fantastic conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Tremendous. Oh, Tende, thank you so much for your time. I really hope that this is an incredible premiere for you and the audience makes so much noise, shows so much love. Dances with Films are like, we gotta have her in New York because it'd
Yeah.
be rude if they don't.
I
It'd be
know. I know. I agree.
all right. So yeah, enjoy the experience. Have a great time, and can't wait to have another conversation with you.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
All right. You take care.
All right.
Thanks.